Retro Quickies, The Adventures of Gilligan's Island. One of the most fascinating things about the early days of the medium of video games was how everyone wanted to have a game associated with their IP, regardless of how weird or out of nowhere it was. Now again, licensed games didn't have quite the stigma that they do nowadays back in the NES era, and there were and still are good licensed games, but some of those licenses are just weird. Like, for example, a game based around a sitcom from the early 1960s that was only still relevant because its 3 seasons had basically been in non-stop syndication since the day it finished its original run. And yes, it is still available on some streaming platforms, so you can still technically watch the show in its entirety even to this day. Gilligan's Island followed the misadventures of a group of 7 castaways: the skipper, captain of the tour boat the SS Minnow, the accident-prone first mate Gilligan, upper-class couple Thurston and Lovely, a movie actress named Ginger, a high school professor called, the Professor, and a farm girl named Mary Ann, all stranded on a deserted, uncharted island out in the middle of the ocean. With their ship wrecked and no way to know where they are out at sea, the show follows these 7 characters and their various attempts to find a way off the island, pretty much all of which are sabotaged or destroyed thanks to Gilligan's antics. You may be wondering why I'm describing the show and not the game, and that's because the developers, Human Entertainment Incorporated, made sure that the game was surprisingly faithful to the source material. Every stage is described as an episode. The characters banter with one another. Hell, Gilligan and the skipper banter while they're walking around, though it's usually just the same 2 text lines repeated ad nauseum. They even go out of their way to capture the likeness of the characters as best that they can via what I think are semi-digitized photos of the cast, though it's hard to tell if it's just that or just remade pixel art. I don't know, I don't watch the show, I just know about it via cultural osmosis. So it's kind of faithful, but does that make it a good game? And what sort of game do you actually make Gilligan's Island into? Well, for a start, it's basically an adventure game with some very light combat and platforming elements. You wander around the island in each stage, talk to other characters, help them solve their problems, and in doing so, slowly make your way towards whatever goal has been set up for you. Build a hut, rescue a friend from racially insensitive native stereotypes, find stone tablets, and so on and so forth. You play as the skipper, who is constantly followed by Gilligan, and the 2 of them have to work together to do whatever it is they have to do that day. However, while the game's setup is like an adventure game, unfortunately it falls apart a bit when you start to play it. As I said, you are the skipper who is followed everywhere by Gilligan, and you wander across the map, which thankfully this game gives you a map to look at for every stage, so you don't actually get lost very easily. You go looking for the other characters, who will either give you a minor quest to complete to get closer to your goal, or will point you in the direction of who you should be talking to. Due to the nature of the way the game is set up, you're going to be going back and forth across the same map several times per stage. You also have a time limit to worry about. If you fail to complete the main goal before time runs out, you get a game over. And while the game is generous enough to give you both a password system and let you restart from the last stage you were on, you do have to start that stage all over again. And given how long some of these stages last, given that you can extend the timer on the stage, and you'll be spending about 20 to 40 minutes on each stage during your first run through, that can be pretty damn tough. The skipper himself is hardy enough to wade through deep rivers, mud pits, and quicksand, but you only start out with a measly punch that can make some creatures retreat, while others just need to be avoided. Even when you get a club, usually one of the last things you need before you fight the boss of each level, you still can't fight off most threats without risking your own health. And then there's Gilligan, and this is where the game really takes a nosedive. I will say it was very bold of them to follow the show so faithfully that Gilligan is far more trouble than he's worth. See, Gilligan is controlled by the AI, and he follows you everywhere. He's actually very good about keeping up with you, and will walk around or over obstacles as close to your path as possible. He is also invincible, so if he gets hit by enemies, he doesn't get hurt, it'll just slow him down. But here's the problem. If he does get too far away from you, or does something stupid like walk over a pit, Gilligan and the skipper will get separated. If you don't get back to Gilligan within 2 minutes, it's just like if the main timer runs out of time, and you get a game over. Most of the time, all you have to do is backtrack to the last screen to get him to follow, but if he falls down a pit, you have to follow him down that pit to assure that you can find him again. Or even worse, you fall down the pit. because Gilligan won't follow you if you fall down a pit or get washed away by a river and he's not in it. And in that instance, you have to make your way back to wherever he was last before you run out of time, all while the main timer is also running in the background. And even if you say wanted to try and accomplish some of the other goals while separated from Gilligan, you can't. Other characters will only ask where Gilligan is if he isn't with you, preventing you from advancing any of the quests or goals for the day. And Gilligan is needed for certain environmental interactions, like climbing trees. In the first few stages, this isn't such a huge deal since the maps are small and there aren't a lot of ways for you to get separated. But once they start introducing multiple holes that you can fall down, underground tunnels that aren't on your main map, and rivers that will carry you down multiple screens, getting separated even once from Gilligan, especially if you don't know the stage map that well, is basically a death sentence. Gilligan will also just sort of wander off on his own, usually when there's something that scares him in the vicinity, but it's never very consistent on what causes him to act that way. Gilligan is just annoying overall, as he and the skipper are constantly making generic observations about themselves and their environment that really don't mean anything and are basically just there to emulate the nature of banter on the show, which is more distracting than anything when you're on a time limit. The game's constant use of sending you back and forth past the same obstacles over and over again in each level also doesn't help, as the game can very quickly become monotonous. The controls are nice and snappy, and pretty simple as well, though this is an NES game, so simplicity was always in the cards. And the game does give you a lot of health and stuff to heal yourself with, so I will give it that. It isn't like the game doesn't want you to beat it, it's just more on the boring and/or frustrating side. Listen, this game does go above and beyond what you would expect from a license as banal as Gilligan's Island. And its design could actually be fun if it were just a bit more in the direction of a full-on adventure game, finding items and using them to solve puzzles or remote obstacles. But the game constantly sending you back and forth to the same areas, the time limit, which can sometimes be incredibly tight, even when you know what you're doing, and the mechanics revolving around babysitting Gilligan himself, well, this isn't the worst game I've played, it's remarkably solid for what it is, but the novelty wears off after the first couple of levels, and the difficulty escalates to the point where the game is a full-on slog. Yeah, you can play through it, but maybe your time would be better spent watching the actual show for the 8th dozen time. Or maybe not, I don't know, I haven't watched the show ever. I got video games to play, geez, don't judge me.